Can one quiet voice be heard above the noise of war? This is the story of Kofi Annan, a young man from Ghana who rose from humble beginnings to become the first black African to lead the United Nations. At a time when the world faced war, famine, and political division, he believed that listening could be just as powerful as speaking, and that peace was worth pursuing even when it seemed far away. At the African Archive, we bring African history to life through the people who lived it. If you enjoy thoughtful, well-researched documentaries like this, please subscribe and join us as we uncover the stories that shaped our continent. Before Kofi Annan became one of the world's most respected diplomats, he was a schoolboy growing up in the Gold Coast, learning lessons that would guide him for the rest of his life. And that is where our story begins. Chapter 1. Before the world knew his name. Long before the world knew the name Kofi Annan, life moved at a gentle pace in the town of Kumasi, in Britain's Gold Coast colony. Before sunrise, traders arranged their goods in busy markets. Cocoa farmers set out for their farms, knowing that the day's work would depend on the weather. Carpenters, tailors, and blacksmiths opened their workshops while children hurried along dusty roads to school. The sounds of birds, bicycles, and morning greetings filled the air. Life was built around family and community. Neighbors looked after one another. Elders settled disagreements and shared stories that taught younger generations about respect, honesty, and responsibility. These lessons were not found only in books. They were learned by watching how people lived. Kumasi was changing. The town had become an important center for trade and education. British colonial rule shaped many parts of daily life. But Ghanaians continued to hold on to their own traditions, languages, and customs. Across the Gold Coast, more families were beginning to believe that education could open doors to a better future. It was into this world that Kofi Annan was born on April 8, 1938. He was born with a twin sister, Efua Atta. Among the Akan people, twins are considered a special blessing, and their names reflect the day they are born. Koffi is the name given to a boy born on a Friday, while Efua is given to a girl born on the same day. Koffi grew up in a family that valued both tradition and public service. His father, Henry Reginald Annan, was a business executive in the cocoa industry, and also held the traditional title of a local chief. His mother, Victoria Annan, came from a respected family with deep roots in the community. From an early age, Koffi saw that leadership was not about giving orders. It was about serving others and earning their trust. As a boy, he was known for being calm and thoughtful. He enjoyed learning, listened more than he spoke, and paid close attention to the people around him. While other children dreamed about what they might become, Koffi spent much of his time asking questions and trying to understand how the world worked. His parents believed that education was one of the greatest gifts they could give their children. They encouraged him to study hard, not simply to build a successful career, but to become a person who could make a difference in the lives of others. No one in Kumasi could have imagined where that journey would lead. To his neighbors, he was simply another boy walking to school each morning. To his teachers, he was a quiet student with great promise. Years later, leaders from every corner of the world would know his name. But before he would speak to presidents and prime ministers, he would first learn to listen. And that lesson would shape the rest of his life. Chapter 2. A student of the world. Kofi Annan believed that every classroom could open a new door. As he grew older, his love for learning became even stronger. He attended Mfansipim School in Cape Coast, one of the Gold Coast's most respected boarding schools. Students came from different parts of the country, bringing with them different languages, traditions, and ideas. There, Koffi learned lessons that reached far beyond the classroom. His teachers encouraged students to think about their responsibilities to others. They reminded them that education was not only for personal success. It was also a way to serve society. Those lessons stayed with him. After finishing school, Koffi continued his studies at the Kumasi College of Science and Technology, now known as the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. But before completing his studies there, an opportunity came that would change his life. He received a scholarship to study economics at Macalester College in the United States. For a young man who had grown up in colonial West Africa, it was a remarkable opportunity. Leaving home meant saying goodbye to family, friends, and everything that was familiar. It also meant stepping into a world that was very different from the one he had always known. America in the late 1950s was a country full of opportunity. But it was also wrestling with deep racial divisions. The civil rights movement was gaining strength as many black Americans demanded equal treatment under the law. Although Kofi Annan did not become a leader in that movement, living through that period gave him a wider understanding of justice, equality, and the shared hopes of people across different nations. After graduating from Macalester College in 1961, Koffi continued his education in Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva was home to many international organizations. People from every continent lived and worked there, solving problems that crossed national borders. For Koffi, it was another chance to learn, not only from books, but from people with different cultures and experiences. Then, in 1962, another door opened. At just 24 years old, Kofi Annan joined the World Health Organization as an administrative and budget officer. The organization was part of the United Nations system. He was not joining as a famous diplomat or political leader. He was joining as a young professional who believed that careful work behind the scenes could improve people's lives. His first responsibilities were quiet but important. He managed budgets, supported international programs, and learned how countries could work together to solve common problems. It was not the kind of work that made newspaper headlines, but it taught him something that would shape the rest of his career. Real leadership is often built long before anyone notices. The young man from Kumasi had taken his first step into the world of international service. He had no way of knowing that one day, the same organization would ask him to lead it. Chapter 3. Learning to lead. When Kofi Annan joined the United Nations system, he was one of many young professionals working behind the scenes. His job did not bring public attention. Most people outside the organization had never heard his name. But every day, he learned how countries work together to solve problems that no nation could solve alone. Over the years, Koffi took on new responsibilities. He worked in different parts of the United Nations, serving in Ethiopia, Egypt, Switzerland, and later at the UN headquarters in New York. Each assignment taught him something new about diplomacy, development, and the challenges facing people around the world. He earned a reputation for staying calm under pressure. Colleagues described him as thoughtful, respectful, and careful with his words. He listened before speaking and looked for common ground when people disagreed. These qualities earned him the trust of those who worked with him. The world around him was changing. Many African nations had gained independence. The Cold War divided much of the world into competing political camps. Civil wars, refugee crises, and famine forced millions of people from their homes. The United Nations was often called upon to respond, but its work was rarely simple. As Koffi's responsibilities grew, so did the weight of the decisions before him. He saw that helping people affected by conflict required more than good intentions. It demanded cooperation between governments, humanitarian organizations, and communities. Even then, success was never guaranteed. By the early 1990s, Kofi Annan had become one of the UN's most experienced officials. He was appointed to oversee the organization's peacekeeping operations. It was one of the most demanding jobs in the United Nations. Peacekeeping missions were being sent into countries torn apart by violence, where every decision could affect thousands of lives. The work brought difficult moments. United Nations peacekeepers were often expected to protect civilians, but they could act only within the limits set by the Security Council and the mandates they were given by member states. Koffi saw firsthand how those limits could affect people caught in conflict. Even so, he believed the United Nations could make a difference. Not because it was perfect, but because it gave nations a place to talk before choosing war. After more than 30 years of quiet service, Kofi Annan had earned the respect of colleagues across the world. Soon, the organization he had served for most of his adult life would ask him to carry its greatest responsibility. The young administrator from Kumasi was about to become the voice of the United Nations. Chapter 4. The Weight of the World. On January 1, 1997, Kofi Annan became the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations. For the first time, a black African who had risen through the organization's own ranks was chosen to lead it. After more than 30 years of service, the quiet administrator from Kumasi now stood at the center of world affairs. The responsibility was enormous. Every day brought new challenges. Wars displaced families from their homes. Diseases crossed borders. Poverty affected millions of people. Natural disasters demanded international action. The United Nations looked to its Secretary General to bring countries together, even when they deeply disagreed. Kofi Annan believed that peace was built through dialogue. He traveled constantly, meeting presidents, community leaders, aid workers, and people whose lives had been changed by conflict. He listened carefully, spoke calmly, and searched for common ground where others saw only division. In 2000, world leaders gathered at the United Nations in New York. Together, they adopted the Millennium Declaration, which led to the Millennium Development Goals. The goals called on nations to work together to reduce extreme poverty, improve education, fight disease, and protect the dignity of every human being. The following year, Kofi Annan and the United Nations were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee recognized their efforts to build a more peaceful and better organized world. For many Africans, it was a proud moment. A man who had grown up in Kumasi was now being honored on the world stage. But leadership also brought painful moments. Questions continued to be asked about the United Nations failures during the 1994 genocide in Rwanda and the 1995 massacre in Srebrenica. Although these tragedies had occurred before Annan became Secretary General, they happened while he held senior responsibilities within the UN. He later acknowledged that the organization had failed to protect many innocent people and called for reforms to help prevent such failures in the future. Then another crisis divided the world. In 2003, the United States and its allies invaded Iraq. Kofi Annan urged governments to work through the United Nations and emphasized the importance of international law. Later, he said that the invasion was not in conformity with the UN Charter, a position that drew both praise and criticism from different parts of the world. Leading the United Nations meant standing in the middle of disagreement. Some governments believed he had gone too far. Others believed he had not gone far enough. Kofi understood that the Secretary General could encourage nations to act, but he could not force them to do so. The United Nations could only be as effective as its member states allowed it to be. Through every success and every disappointment, he remained committed to one belief: that even in a divided world, conversation was better than conflict. After 10 years as Secretary General, his time in office was coming to an end. But his work for peace was far from over. Chapter 5. Still serving. On December 31, 2006, Kofi Annan stepped down as Secretary General of the United Nations. For 10 years, he had carried one of the world's most demanding responsibilities. His time in office had been marked by both important achievements and difficult disappointments. But retirement did not mean the end of his service. Kofi believed that peace was not built only in conference rooms. It was built wherever people were willing to listen to one another. After leaving the United Nations, he continued to travel the world, meeting leaders, community groups, and young people. He encouraged countries to strengthen democracy, respect human rights, and solve their differences through dialogue instead of violence. In 2007, Kenya faced one of the darkest moments in its history. A disputed presidential election led to violence across the country. Communities that had lived side by side turned against one another. Hundreds of people were killed, and hundreds of thousands were forced to leave their homes. The African Union asked Kofi Annan to help. He brought together the country's political leaders and encouraged them to keep talking, even when trust had almost disappeared. The negotiations were long and often difficult. But in 2008 the two sides reached a power-sharing agreement that helped bring an end to the violence. For many Kenyans, it was a chance to begin healing. Koffi never claimed that peace came because of one person. He often reminded people that lasting peace belongs to those who choose it, protect it, and work for it every day. He also established the Kofi Annan Foundation. Through the foundation, he supported peace, good governance, youth leadership, and fair elections. He believed that strong institutions and responsible leadership were essential if countries were to avoid conflict and create opportunities for future generations. Young Africans became especially important to him. Whenever he spoke to students, he encouraged them to lead with honesty, courage, and compassion. He reminded them that Africa's future would not be shaped by speeches alone, but by ordinary people choosing to serve their communities with integrity. His title had changed. His mission had not. Whether he was speaking with presidents or sitting with students, Kofi Annan remained the same thoughtful man who believed that listening was one of the greatest forms of leadership. The boy who had left Kumasi many years earlier had become one of the world's most respected voices for peace. But the greatest measure of his life would not be found in the offices he held. It would be found in what he left behind. Chapter 6. What remains? On August 18, 2018, Kofi Annan died at the age of 80. News of his death spread quickly around the world. From Ghana to New York, from Geneva to Nairobi. Leaders and ordinary people paused to remember a man whose calm voice had become a symbol of peace and international cooperation. In Ghana, many remembered him as a son of the nation. Around the world, others remembered him as the diplomat who believed that every human life had equal value, no matter where a person was born or what language they spoke. Kofi Annan's life was not without disappointment. He knew that the United Nations could not stop every war or prevent every tragedy. He carried the weight of conflicts that ended in terrible loss of life. He spoke openly about the need for the United Nations to learn from its failures and to become better at protecting vulnerable people. Yet he never gave up on dialogue. He believed that even when peace seemed impossible, people had a responsibility to keep talking. He often reminded world leaders that lasting peace is built through patience, trust, and cooperation, not through force alone. His influence reached far beyond the United Nations. He inspired young diplomats, humanitarian workers, teachers, and students to believe that service is one of the highest forms of leadership. He showed that a person does not need to be the loudest voice in the room to make a difference. Perhaps that is why so many people respected him. He listened before he spoke. He sought understanding before judgment. He chose cooperation over confrontation whenever he could. Today, Kofi Annan's legacy lives on in the work of those who continue to build peace, defend human rights, strengthen democracy, and bring people together across cultures and nations. The boy who once walked the streets of Kumasi never forgot where he came from. And even after reaching one of the highest offices in the world, he remained what he had always hoped to be: a servant of others. Kofi Annan's story reminds us that history is not shaped only by those who command armies or lead revolutions. Sometimes, it is shaped by those who build bridges where others see walls. That is what remains.